Israel rejects a ceasefire deal with Hamas and continues strikes on targets in Rafah.
More than two-thirds of 705 MEPs have paid part-time jobs, from which they earn a total of more than €8.6 million a year.
Israel has rejected a ceasefire deal with Hamas, with officials criticizing it as watered down and far from the country's basic demands. Details of what was in the proposal have been scarce, but it's believed to have included an exchange of Israeli hostages for Palestinian prisoners and the withdrawal of the Israeli military from Gaza. The news that Hamas had agreed to the proposal was met with jubilation on the streets of Rafah among Gaza's war-weary population.
فرحنا ما صدقناش حسيت حالي في حلم يعني تقريبا فرحة مش طبيعية. كانت يعني مش عارف كيف اوصف لك فرحة مش طبيعية بس إن شاء الله بتتم على خير.
But just hours after Hamas agreed to the deal, Israel launched what it called targeted strikes against the group's positions in Rafah. More than 1.4 million Palestinians are sheltering in the city after being advised to relocate there by the Israeli military, who declared it a safe zone. Earlier in the day, the IDF ordered 100,000 Palestinians to evacuate to a humanitarian zone in the coastal municipality of Al-Mawasi. Israel's war cabinet says it's determined to proceed with a full-scale ground offensive into Rafah to eliminate the Hamas battalions reportedly based there. Those plans have been met with fierce international criticism.
Today's evacuation orders for East Rafah will only worsen the civilians' suffering. They are being instructed to relocate to Al-Masawi, which is already overcrowded and lacking safety and essential humanitarian services. A mass evacuation on this scale is impossible to carry out safely.
Meanwhile, protests have continued in Tel Aviv. Demonstrators are hoping to push the government to bring home the Israeli hostages from Gaza. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he would send a delegation to meet with negotiators to try to reach an agreement acceptable to both sides. China's President Xi Jinping has said his country is willing to work with France towards a global cessation of war during the upcoming Paris Olympics. At a press conference in Paris, Xi said his country has been playing an active role in achieving peace in the war in Ukraine. China claims neutrality in the Ukraine conflict, but Xi and Russian President Vladimir Putin declared their governments had a no-limits friendship before Moscow's invasion of the country.
女士们、先生们，当今世界很不太平。作为联合国安理会常任理事国和负责任大国，中国愿同法方一道。
Trade disagreements mark the start of Xi Jinping's, the Chinese president's, two-day state visit to France. But after what the Chinese leader qualified as fruitful talks along with French President Emmanuel Macron, it seems like Beijing is ready to spare the French cognac industry. Indeed, China had threatened to impose very strict tariffs on this very important product for both countries after the EU launched a series of investigations against what they say are market-distorting practices by Beijing, like, for example, flooding the EU market with very cheap electric vehicles. Another very important subject this Monday evening on the table that was discussed, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. President Macron welcomed China's commitment to refrain from selling any more technology that could help Moscow in its war against Ukraine. It also thanked Beijing for supporting its idea of an Olympic truce for all conflicts during the upcoming Paris Summer Olympics. However, it is important to note that not once did Xi Jinping condemn Moscow's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, which was one of Macron's main goals this Monday evening. And after France, Xi Jinping will travel to Moscow-friendly nations such as Hungary and Serbia. And this itinerary is clearly sending a message as the EU is still figuring out whether China should be considered as a strategic partner or, as the US tends to view this nation, a dangerous rival. Sofia Katsenkova reporting from Paris for Euronews.
Boeing's Starlight space capsule launch was called off this week as technical difficulties thwarted the aircraft during countdown. 2 NASA test pilots were strapped in for the International Space Station-bound mission when it was aborted. A noisy valve means Starlight remains in the stratosphere for now.
Good things are worth waiting for, and we'll get a chance to see that rocket and spacecraft lift off the pad here soon.
If a fix is found, the spacecraft could shoot for the stars again as early as Tuesday night.
More than 2/3 of 705 MEPs have paid part-time jobs, from which they earn a total of more than €8.6 million a year. New research published by Transparency International assessed the finances of MEPs working second jobs. Topping the list is a Lithuanian MP who declared €3 million per year working for a real estate company. He is followed by a French and then a Hungarian politician, then by the president of the European People's Party, Manfred Weber.
Published on the European Parliament website. It is perfectly legal to have a side job as long as we are transparent about it. But obviously, when we look at the contents of the declarations that the MEPs have filled in, we do see some activities that really raises some concerns. Activities, for example, involving a multinational company while they themselves were in charge of drafting legislation that might affect that company.
Transparency is not accusing any MEPs of breaking the rules, but the research underscores that some MEPs are getting paid by companies in the same sector as a lot of their parliamentary activity. Among those involved, Polish Marek Belka told Euronews that his supervisory board meetings do not violate his obligations as an MEP. Transparency says potential conflicts of interest must be investigated, especially given the influence scandals that have taken place in Brussels in the past.
As we see today in the European elections, one of the key themes is about foreign interference, and we know that theoretically, according to the rules today, you are perfectly allowed to receive money maybe from a third country government or have an activity as long as you are transparent about it. And so what we advocate is a banning of these side activities.
Stricter rules in European Parliament mean MEPs are now required to publish more detailed information about their finances.
The president of Austria's National Council, Wolfgang Sobotka, has painted over anti-Semitic graffiti in Vienna. Austria's Jewish community says it's recorded an increasing number of anti-Semitic instances in recent months. Also in Vienna, the third European Conference on Anti-Semitism is happening at the Austrian Academy of Sciences. International experts have been invited to discuss measures to combat anti-Semitism and develop initiatives to promote Jewish life in Europe.
Hundreds of demonstrators gathered in Berlin to protest against extreme right violence and to promote democracy in the country, following the attack on a candidate of Olaf Scholz's party for the European elections. Matthias Eck, the SPD's favorite candidate in Saxony for the June 9 elections, was beaten on Friday in Dresden by 4 individuals as he hung campaign posters for the Social Democratic Party.
Wir waren gestern geschockt, wir waren fassungslos, wir waren traurig, wir sind wütend, wir sind immer noch geschockt über die Nachricht, dass unser Freund Matthias Ecke zusammengeschlagen wurde beim Plakate aufhängen.
Show me what democracy looks like. Denn wir wissen aus der Geschichte, Nazis, die gewinnen nicht erst dort an Macht, wo sie Mehrheiten haben. Nazis gewinnen dort an Macht, wo Demokraten passiv werden. Jetzt ist der Moment, dass alle Demokraten zusammenkommen und laut sagen, wir werden nicht weichen.
The 4 suspects, aged 17 to 18 years old, were already identified by the police.
Nachdem sich am 5. Mai bereits ein 17-jähriger Jugendlicher bei der Polizei gestellt hatte, konnten durch unsere Ermittlungen 2 weitere Tatverdächtige namentlich bekannt gemacht werden. Und auf Anordnung des Amtsgerichts Dresden wurden dann diese 2 Wohnungen auch durchsucht und die 2 Personen auch festgestellt. Im Laufe des weiteren Abends haben wir dann auch noch den 4. Tatverdächtigen festgestellt.
Nearly 2,000 people also took the streets in Dresden during the weekend to express support for democracy.
Armed police have been deployed in the Swedish city of Malmö for this week's Eurovision Song Contest. A police report released earlier this month highlighted some of the potential security threats to the event, including cyber attacks. There's also concern about possible protests against Israel's participation because of the war in Gaza. Sweden's alert level was raised to high last year following a spate of Quran burnings, with the country classed as a priority target for terrorists. Two activists from the French civil resistance group Riposte Alimentaire or Food Response have been arrested after throwing orange powder in the Hall of Mirrors in the Palace of Versailles. Local media say the group, which campaigns for sustainable food, had previously taken responsibility for similar protest action, including throwing soup at the Mona Lisa in the Louvre. A statement released by the group said the Versailles protest aimed to highlight the growing inequalities that allow a privileged minority to monopolize resources. Authorities at Versailles say there was no damage to any items in the hall.